What's up fam? Thanks for all the love you've been showing Dragon Ball Hakai. Your support has been wild, and it means the world. Today, we're going way back to the story of Yamoshi, the first Super Saiyan God. As always, the episodes are released in one full compilation. When a new part drops, I update the same video. If you've already seen the start, no worries. I marked where the new chapter begins. Drop a like, hit subscribe, turn on the bell, and if you want to support even more, hit join. Let's dive into this untold story. The origin of divine power begins now. Hakai. Dragon Ball Hakai Special, The Story of Yamoshi. Chapter 1, The First Vegeta. Our story begins with a great battle taking place. From the looks of the warriors fighting, it's clear that they're all Saiyans. We see Saiyan men, Saiyan women, Saiyans dressed in mysterious outfits, and even some Saiyans who appear to be larger and stronger than the average. It is said that over 1,000 years ago, the Saiyan race of Universe 7 lived on their home planet, known as planet Sadala. At that time, there wasn't a single empire ruling the planet. Instead, 4 great Saiyan kingdoms each controlled a portion of it. In the panels depicting the battle, we can get a rough idea of who these groups are. We see Saiyans who are much bigger than average, practically giants. We also see female warriors. Some Saiyans look more like the typical kind, and others wear outfits that cover more of their bodies. It seems like an all-out battle is raging between them, with each group fighting for itself. Returning to the narration, we learn that the Eastern Kingdom was made up of the Giant Clan, a lineage of enormous Saiyans known for their immense strength and durability, though their numbers were small. In other words, they were a powerful people, but very few of them existed. In the main story of Dragon Ball Hakai, we met a guy named Verdon, the Giant of the East. Verdon was clearly much larger than the average Saiyan, and it's said that he was a descendant of the Giant Clan. In fact, he was the last remaining descendant. King Vegeta also mentioned the Giant Clan when talking to Bardock, saying that they were incredibly powerful warriors. He even mocked Verdon, saying that he was clearly much weaker than the legends claimed the giants were. It looks like these giants we're seeing now were Verdon's ancestors, but Verdon probably wasn't a pure-blooded giant, especially since there didn't seem to be any of these giants left. He probably had a giant ancestor and manifested those genes more intensely, which is why he was bigger and stronger than the average Saiyan. Keep in mind that it's said Verdon was at the top of the power scale among low-class Saiyans, meaning he was much stronger than most warriors on the planet. However, King Vegeta mentioned that most giants were comparable to mid-class warriors, and it wasn't uncommon for some to reach the high-class level. That's why he considered Verdon so weak. So there's already a connection between this special story and the main one. But let's keep going. The Western Kingdom was composed entirely of female Saiyans who were highly skilled and deadly warriors. The Southern Kingdom was led by an infamous clan that, unlike the rest of the Saiyan race, used sorcery. Meanwhile, the Northern Kingdom was made up of warriors who weren't too different from the norm but possessed great honor and determination. And just a quick side note, it's also mentioned in Dragon Ball Hakai that in the past, there were Saiyans who used sorcery. This comment definitely refers to the clan that led the Southern Kingdom. Additionally, it's stated here that they are infamous, meaning their practices weren't well regarded. Even King Vegeta himself, when talking to Goku in the main story, mentions that he despises that kind of thing. So, there's another connection here. Now moving on, the Eastern Kingdom, the Kingdom of Giants, was ruled by War Chief Brokkon, the Slayer of 1,000. This guy was known for his immense strength and resilience, as well as for an incredible feat, single-handedly facing and killing a troop of 1,000 enemies. In the middle of the battlefield, a silhouette emerges. This silhouette belongs to a fierce-looking woman holding the head of an opponent. This woman is Aspa, the Bloody Beauty. She is the war lady of the Western Kingdom, known for being a stunning yet lethal warrior, often having her body drenched in the blood of her enemies. Looks like this woman has a unique kind of skincare, huh? Aspa shows just how ruthless she is, proudly displaying her enemy's severed head like a true trophy. The Supreme Lord of the Southern Kingdom is the infamous Zukran, the Reaper, said to have taken countless lives with his treacherous spells. And now we see someone we already know well. While this guy is surrounded by enemies, it's stated that the Northern Kingdom is led by a newly appointed leader named Yamoshi, a prodigious warrior who, since taking the title of Protector of the North, has been leading his kingdom to victory in the war. That's because he possesses immense power and is also a great leader. Seeing himself surrounded, Yamoshi begins to scream, concentrating his power. As his ki explodes, the warriors encircling him are wiped out of existence and a massive ki explosion erupts. Right after that, a distinctive aura is seen surrounding Yamoshi, and now he also appears quite different. Both his eyes and his hair have taken on lighter tones. The leader of the Eastern Kingdom is War Chief Brokon, the Slayer of 1,000. The leader of the Western Kingdom is War Lady Aspa, the Bloody Beauty. The leader of the Southern Kingdom is Supreme Lord Zukran, the Reaper. And the leader of the Northern Kingdom is Protector of the North Yamoshi, known as the Super Saiyan. Unleashing his transformation, which has just multiplied his power dozens of times over, the Super Saiyan charges through the enemy troops, sending everyone flying. With a fierce gaze and a war cry, he prepares a punch, undoubtedly aiming at someone. Yamoshi's target is Brokon, the Slayer of 1,000, who smirks and accepts the Northern leader's challenge, saying he wants to see the power of this so-called Super Saiyan. The two clash fists, generating a massive explosion of impact and energy across the battlefield. And the one who loses this struggle is the War Chief of the Giants, who is sent flying, now missing half of his arm, which was simply obliterated upon impact with Yamoshi's fist. Brokon is immediately knocked out from the blow and is quickly attended to by his comrades, who are clearly both worried and frustrated, seeing their leader fallen and missing a part of his arm. As soon as Brokon falls, Aspa rushes in to face Yamoshi. The War Lady of the Western Kingdom launches a flurry of attacks. She puts everything she has into her assault on the Super Saiyan, striking with all the strength, speed, skill, and precision she can muster. Even so, for Yamoshi, dodging Aspa's attacks seems like the easiest thing in the world. She realizes this and curses the situation. Yamoshi counters with a backhand slap, striking the Western leader in the face with the back of his hand. With just that simple blow, she's sent flying, already incapable of continuing the fight. Aspa's battle sisters are in shock, watching their leader be defeated so effortlessly. But the one who truly takes advantage of this opportunity is the Supreme Lord of the Southern Kingdom, Zukran, who uses his magic to ensnare Yamoshi with a magical bind that seems to cause him pain. Zukran thanks the Northern Protector for helping him deal with those two, who probably would have given him a lot of trouble. Now he's going to get rid of Yamoshi as well and win this war. But Yamoshi shows Zukran that underestimating the Super Saiyan is a big mistake. Raising his ki, he shatters the sorcerer's magical bind, completely shocking Zukran. Then Yamoshi moves at a speed the Southern leader can't keep up with, instantly appearing right in front of him with his hand pointed straight at his face, ready to blow Zukran's head off if necessary. Yamoshi tells Zukran that his magic is nothing against his power and orders him to surrender or die. The Reaper doesn't want to have his own life reaped today, so all he can do is lower his head and accept defeat, saying that he surrenders. After Yamoshi transforms into a Super Saiyan and defeats the leaders of the other 3 kingdoms on planet Sadala, he is declared the new Saiyan King. From now on, the Saiyan peoples of Sadala would no longer be divided into 4 kingdoms, but instead united into a single kingdom, ruled by the great Super Saiyan warrior. Because of his kind heart, and also as a political strategy, Yamoshi decides to spare the other leaders and even grant them leadership positions in his government. By doing so, Yamoshi is able to more easily gain the affection and trust of the other Saiyan peoples, since he is welcoming into his inner circle the very leaders they trusted and followed. After becoming the king of all Saiyan peoples, Yamoshi decides to abandon his birth name and adopt a royal name, one that would be passed down to his descendants, the future Saiyan kings. The name he chooses is Vegeta, and so King Vegeta I emerges, founding the Vegeta dynasty. So basically guys, Yamoshi gives up his birth name to take on a king's name. Many kings and emperors throughout history have abandoned their birth names upon ascending the throne, preferring to adopt names that represented their dynasty or lineage. In the Roman Empire, for example, emperors took on names like Caesar or Augustus, which were directly linked to figures like Julius Caesar and Augustus, the great icons of the empire. The name Caesar, in particular, was used so often that it became synonymous with emperor and spread to other empires, influencing the titles that different peoples gave to their rulers. For example, in Russia, until some time ago, the leader was called Tsar, which comes from Caesar. Likewise, the German Empire once called its leader Kaiser, which also derives from Caesar. But anyway, this practice of changing one's name upon becoming king wasn't exclusive to the Romans. In Egypt, many pharaohs changed their names when ascending the throne. In China, emperors also adopted special names like Kangxi or Qianlong, which symbolized not just their reign, but also a new era or cycle for the empire. In France and England, it was common for kings to choose names from older dynasties. This kind of name change helped solidify a king's or emperor's power, showing that they were part of something greater and more enduring than just an individual figure. And in Dragon Ball, the same concept applies, since there apparently existed a lineage of Saiyan kings named Vegeta, with the Vegeta we know being the fourth in that line, as his full name is Vegeta the Fourth. Anyway, I just wanted to share this Dragon Ball trivia with you guys and its connection to real life. A few years later, thanks to the unity of all Saiyan peoples and the competent rule of King Vegeta I, planet Sadala was able to prosper like never before. And in fact, we can already see some signs of technology starting to emerge on the planet, which previously seemed quite primitive. But of course, not everything is smooth sailing, and we see this during a meeting where King Vegeta doesn't seem too happy to be there. Sitting on his throne, deeply focused on what's being said. Who's speaking is Aspa, the Bloody Beauty, the former war lady of the Western Kingdom, who is now the commander of the Royal Army's Intelligence Division. She's reporting to the king about monsters that have apparently been terrorizing Sadala for some time. She says these monsters keep attacking various points on the planet. Dozens of cities and villages have already been attacked, and thousands of soldiers and civilians have been killed. The monsters Aspa is talking about are clearly Cybermen. It seems that at this time, the Saiyan people were still unfamiliar with these creatures and are experiencing them for the first time. Brokon, the Slayer of 1,000, the former war chief of the Eastern Kingdom, who is now the commander of the Royal Army, takes advantage of Aspa's report to add that these creatures are strong enough to challenge their soldiers, even surpassing many of them. Despite the difficulties, the army manages to eliminate these groups, but the real problem is that they keep appearing in a way no one can explain. It's as if these creatures are sprouting out of nowhere to attack. And since the army can't predict their random assaults, they can't react before suffering significant losses. The king becomes curious at the use of the word sprouting. Maybe he's getting an idea, or perhaps he's just reflecting on the challenge of dealing with enemies that simply sprout out of nowhere. Now, the one speaking is Zukran, the Reaper, the former Supreme Lord of the Southern Kingdom, who is now the commander of the Royal Army's Engineering Division. Zukran says that the Engineering Division's expenses are extremely high, and his division will need more funding to continue rebuilding the zones destroyed by the monster attacks. The king sighs and simply agrees. Sometime later, after the meeting, Commander Zukran is walking through the palace. He heads to his bedroom, and once he gets there, he lets out a grin he seemed to have been holding back for a while. After that, he grabs a device from inside a drawer in his room's furniture, and by pressing a button on the device, he contacts someone via hologram, a woman who, judging by her pointed ears, appears to be a Majin. The woman seems a bit surprised that Zukran is reaching out. She didn't seem to expect him to contact her again so soon. She comments that he got in touch faster this time, which suggests they've spoken before and that he usually took longer to reach out. Zukran informs her that the king has just approved more funding for his division and that, as usual, he will siphon off part of the money to buy more Saibaman seeds. But this time, Zukran wants a much larger quantity, enough to create a small army. The Majin woman seems intrigued by his request, and asks if he can really afford it. She warns him that since she has already secured so many seeds for him, they're starting to run low, so she'll have to charge more for each one this time. It's just the law of supply and demand, right? If supply is low and demand is high, the price goes up. But it seems like Zukran isn't stingy, and he tells her not to worry about that, just bring him what he's asking for. Besides, he also wants those special bugs she mentioned last time. The Majin woman tells him not to worry, she'll bring everything. As soon as the call ends, Zukran can't contain his excitement, saying that the king won't see it coming. In other words, guys, Zukran is one hell of a corrupt scumbag. As we saw in Dragon Ball Daima, it turns out that the Cybermen actually originate from the demon realm, and if you look at their pointed ears, that becomes even more evident. This Majin woman is getting the Cyberman seeds from the demon realm and smuggling them to Zukran, and Zukran in turn is using the Cybermen to wreak havoc on Sadala, destroying cities and villages. Since he's the leader of the engineering division, it's his division's job to rebuild whatever gets destroyed. So whenever something is destroyed, the king provides funding for his division, and Zukran uses part of that money to buy more seeds and cause even more destruction. Basically, the more destruction the Cybermen cause on the planet, the more money Zukran gets, making the king's life even harder, all while securing resources for his eventual grab for power. And as for those special bugs he mentioned, he's probably referring to the meaty bugs that exist in the demon realm. But which ones exactly? A few days later, Zukran has yet another of the many meetings he's already had with the supplier of Cyberman seeds. This meeting, which probably follows the same pattern as the others, takes place in the middle of a desert, where there's no one around to witness the betrayal. Zukran arrives in an airplane from the planet, while the smuggler shows up in a ship typical of the demon realm. The smuggler from the demon realm, named Dema, steps out of the ship through a ramp that was just lowered onto the desert floor, already showing 2 full sacks, presumably filled with Cyberman seeds. Judging by their previous conversation, these sacks probably hold enough to wreak havoc across the Saiyan cities. Dema comments again that Zukran ordered a lot this time and asks if he's really going to be able to pay. Zukran walks up to her, answering yes. The more destruction those little monsters cause, the more money the king gives to his division to rebuild villages and cities, so the more money he can divert to make new purchases from her. Obviously, he can't slack off on the reconstruction of the major cities, or the king would notice. But no one will care if a poor village or two doesn't get rebuilt as well as it should. Dema says Zukran is really wicked for leaving those poor folks in misery, just to buy more of the very creatures that destroy them. But she doesn't say it with a look of contempt or pity. She says it with a look like she finds it all amusing. Zukran justifies the wickedness by saying it's a necessary evil, but he also says this situation won't last much longer. The king's popularity is dropping fast due to all the destruction caused by the Cybermen and the crown's failure to deal with them. At this point, both public opinion and many within the army are starting to question King Vegeta's ability to rule. Zukran believes that one more massive Cybermen attack, strong enough to cause major casualties and destruction, could be enough to get the king deposed. And when that happens, he, who has secretly gained the support of many in the army, will take over. But Zukran is eager to see the goods and asks Dema to show him the so-called magic bugs she brought. Dema, after handing over the sacks of Cyberman seeds for Zukran to hold, pulls out a smaller bag, takes out some oddly shaped bugs, and shows them to Zukran, extending her hand so he can get a better look. She says these are the Medibugs. She brought a few kinds for him to check out, and each insect has a different function. But among all of them, in her opinion, the most useful are the join bugs. She highlights that specific insect for Zukran to see better and explains that a person can gain unimaginable power by using this little thing. Zukran gets really interested and asks her to explain more. She tells him that when 2 people eat this insect, their bodies merge. She explains that there are several types of join bugs and each one results in a different kind of fusion. But regarding the species she's showing, it causes a type of fusion where the powers of those who eat it are added and multiplied many times over. However, unlike many fusions, a new being with a new consciousness isn't created. Instead, the consciousness of the stronger person from before the fusion is the one that remains. So basically, folks, from what Dema is explaining here, this fusion is different from the Metamoran and Potara fusions, where a new person is born from the fusion. Here, the fusion seems much more like the assimilation done by Namekians, where the bodies merge, the power multiplies, but the consciousness of a single person can remain. Piccolo, for example, fused with both the old Kami and the Namekian warrior Nail. But in all those cases, the consciousness that remained was Piccolo's. He basically stayed the same person, though he did gain some extra knowledge. In the case of Namekian fusion, the appearance of the person who remains also doesn't change, but we'll have to wait and see if that's going to be the case with these insects too. Back to the chapter. When Zukran hears Dema explain how the fusion makes people more powerful, he gets super excited, saying it's perfect. But it seems there are some details that the people who are going to fuse need to pay attention to, and Dema is just about to explain that to him. However, at that very moment, the ground beneath the two of them starts to crack, and then people begin emerging from the ground as if they were sprouting up. In a split second, Zukran and Dema are already surrounded, and Dema realizes they've fallen into a trap. Soon after, Aspa also emerges from the ground, which leaves Zukran quite surprised when he sees her, asking how this happened. Aspa mocks Zukran, saying with a smirk that he underestimated the intelligence division led by her. Right after that, several other Saiyan soldiers start appearing, making it even clearer that this was a major setup. And to top off the huge mess Zukran's gotten himself into, the king himself arrives, accompanied by more soldiers and the commander of the royal army, Brokon. When the king lands near him, Zukran shouts Yamoshi's name. The way he says Yamoshi's name suggests a mix of both fear and anger, but Yamoshi corrects his traitorous subject, saying that to him, it's not Yamoshi, it's King Vegeta. While Dema is freaking out, realizing they're completely screwed, Zukran asks how the king and the others found out everything. The king asks if Zukran really thought he wouldn't notice the money from the army's engineering division being siphoned off. He explains that he noticed the construction in the villages farthest from the cities wasn't up to par, so he ordered an investigation. In the end, they were finally able to track down who was responsible for the whole mess. Probably at first, Yamoshi didn't even connect the embezzlement from the engineering division with the Cybermen problem, but he noticed the corruption, and while investigating, ended up discovering the connection. Well, Zukran gets extremely pissed off at that explanation. He says it's absurd and asks what kind of king would go that far just to care about the riffraff. Yamoshi replies that the kind of king he is does care about that sort of thing. Brocken declares Zukran under arrest, telling him to surrender or else he's going to die. Zukran says he'd rather die, and then fires an energy blast in the king's direction. But the king doesn't even bother to move and takes the blast head on. However, Zukran's attack seems to have been completely insignificant to Yamoshi, who now reveals yet another transformation, Super Saiyan 2. Looks like this is the first time Zukran is seeing Yamoshi using this transformation. He notices that Yamoshi's appearance is a bit different and he seems even more resilient. Zukran realizes the king has boosted his power even further, which leaves him both amazed and furious. Seeing that Zukran has no intention of surrendering, Brocken orders that the traitor be executed. Dema, realizing things are about to get seriously ugly, hurries to create an energy shield around herself and Zukran, and she was right to do so, because immediately afterward, energy blasts come at them from all directions. Dema is clearly worried about the situation, saying this is really bad. Zukran, who doesn't seem to know what to do on his own, asks what kind of powers she knows how to use, remembering that she once told him she could fight and also use more magic than the average demon. Let's remember that Panzi said in Dragon Ball Daima that every Majin knows at least one kind of magic. But we know that more evolved Majins can use a variety of different powers like Neva, Dabura, Babidi, and Goma, for example. Seems like this woman named Dema is one of those Majins with above average powers. Dema confirms what Zukran just said, but none of the magic she knows is especially useful against that many people. She even mentions a spell that can corrupt people and turn them into her servants, as long as those people have evil in their hearts and their willpower isn't too strong. But she can't use it on so many people at once. This spell Dema mentioned might be the same one Babidi used to recruit his subordinates, though maybe she's just not as skilled as Babidi after all. In terms of magic, hardly anyone compared to him, but it could also be a different kind of spell with a similar effect. After hearing what Dema just said, Zukran finally seems to get an idea, even if it's not one he likes very much. He looks at the join bug that Dema had just shown earlier, grabs it from the ground, and eats half of it. Dema doesn't understand what he's trying to do and asks what he's doing, but before she can even react, Zukran takes advantage of her open mouth and shoves the insect down her throat. Dema ends up swallowing the insect even though she didn't want to, and almost desperately asks what he just did. Seeing that the protective dome created by Dema repelled all the attacks fired by the soldiers, Yamoshi decides to finish the job himself. He tells the others to leave it to him and says he's going to eliminate the two of them personally. Yamoshi fires an energy wave that actually destroys the shield, which makes him believe it's finally over. But right then, something strange starts happening, which catches the king's attention. At that moment, a new being appears, a demon Saiyan. This demon sarcastically asks for forgiveness from King Vegeta, stating that they're not done yet. The title of chapter 2 is The Saiyan Demon, and the chapter starts with some Saiyan soldiers from Yamoshi's army, or King Vegeta I, watching a huge swirl of energy rise. It's a dark and extremely dense energy that really scares the Saiyan warriors while stirring up chaos in the region. The soldiers don't understand what's going on, but they know that whatever it is, it's definitely not good. And in the middle of all that swirling energy, a new person appears, a being never seen before, but with a very familiar look. This being that's just been born is the result of the fusion between the Saiyan Zukran and the demon Dema. This being is a Saiyan demon. Aspa is very confused and asks the king what happened to Zukran and that other person who was with him. Of course, Yamoshi doesn't really understand much either, since he probably never saw anything like this happen before and probably isn't familiar with the concept of fusions. But he manages to roughly figure out what happened and replies to Aspa saying it seems that Zukran's body and that woman's body merged, and not only their bodies, but their powers too. Yamoshi notices that the power Zukran is giving off now is incomparably greater than before, and he says this with concern, which means Zukran's power may have increased to the point of becoming a threat even to Yamoshi in Super Saiyan 2, who currently has his normal power multiplied about 100 times. Zukran addresses the king and with great satisfaction raises his hands and starts releasing a strange energy while telling Yamoshi to watch his soldiers become his. Zukran extends his hands and starts spreading that strange energy around, and it spreads like a sort of dust that quickly reaches everyone nearby. The moment that dark energy starts spreading, everyone around starts feeling strange, like something really bad is happening. It doesn't take long before everyone starts feeling extremely unwell. They start collapsing, screaming, and writhing. Some seem to be feeling pain in their bones or muscles. Others look like they're choking. Others seem to be going insane. But what they all have in common is that none of them are doing well. But among everyone, King Vegeta stands strong, the only one still on his feet among the fallen warriors. But you can see that even the king isn't doing all that well, and he seems to be feeling some level of discomfort too. Brocken starts putting into words what's happening. In terrible shape, with his veins almost popping out of his body, he begins asking what this is and says that right now he's feeling a huge rage and bloodlust, something he can barely even describe. Suddenly something begins to appear on Brocken's body, specifically on his forehead. It's a kind of letter, very similar to the letter M, and at the same time this happens, Brocken starts to look more savage, and the edges of his eyes start turning black. Aspa, also with veins nearly bursting from her body, is just as confused as Brocken. She says she doesn't know what's going on, but she feels a terrible evil trying to take over her mind, as if this sudden evil is trying to completely dominate her. By this point, the letter M has also appeared on Aspa's forehead, and she's in such bad shape that her eyes are extremely bloodshot and blood is dripping from her mouth. Yamoshi though clearly affected much less intensely, also says he's feeling it. He obviously concludes that this is all Zukran's doing, that he's trying to take over their minds through some kind of spell. But the king is determined not to let something like that happen. And so he begins to release his ki with great intensity, shouting as he pushes the flaming electric aura of Super Saiyan 2 even higher. Yamoshi shouts that he won't allow himself to be dominated, and at the same time he shouts this, the strange energy released by Zukran begins to be pushed away from him. In the end, the great pride, determination, and power of King Vegeta I prevailed against the magic of the Saiyan demon. No one can bend the pride and determination of a Vegeta like that. This leaves Zukran very surprised, hardly believing that Yamoshi managed to resist his domination. Yamoshi turns to his commanders, Brokkon and Aspa, telling them to resist too. To resist, they need to release their powers and strength of spirit. Brokkon, the slayer of 1,000, and Aspa, the bloody beauty, prove that they are truly worthy of being commanders of the Saiyan army led by the great king Vegeta I. Gathering all the willpower and ki they have, they scream as they unleash their powers, causing a flaming aura to emanate with extraordinary intensity while expelling the invading evil energy released by Zukran. Brokkon and Aspa, now transformed into Super Saiyans, catch their breath. They're tired, but they were victorious in this battle for their own minds. It seems that during the time that passed between Yamoshi's victory over them and now, Brokkon and Aspa managed to evolve further and reached Super Saiyan. Honestly, that was already expected, since from the start, it was clear that their power levels weren't that far from base Yamoshi's, and they probably only needed a bit more training to reach that level too. After discovering the existence of this transformation by seeing Yamoshi use it, they must have trained specifically for it and ended up figuring out how to reach that level. Just by looking at their hair, this transformation might even remind you of Super Saiyan 3, since their hair is pretty long, really resembling Super Saiyan 3, but that's definitely not the case. First off, Yamoshi has only shown Super Saiyan 2 so far, and I doubt Brokkon or Aspa managed to become stronger than him. Second, they still have eyebrows, and they don't give off that more intense electric aura of Super Saiyan 3. But anyway, comment what you thought of Brokkon and Aspa's Super Saiyan designs. I personally thought they looked super cool. And about this magic from Zukran, it's clearly the same spell Babidi used to get his henchmen. As mentioned before, Dema, the Majin who fused with Zukran, knew a lot of spells, and she even mentioned a spell that can control people's minds. It seems like she really was talking about the same spell Babidi used. The problem is, Dema didn't have enough power or skill to use that spell on many people at once. But now that she's fused with Zukran, the fusion's increased power and abilities allowed her to use that magic on a larger number of people. Plus, Zukran, besides being a Saiyan warrior, was already a skilled sorcerer too, and that definitely helped. After seeing that Brokkon and Aspa broke free from his mind control by transforming into Super Saiyans, Zukran comments in surprise about them managing to transform, and he gets irritated about it, saying that no matter how much he's worked hard all this time, they're still way ahead of him. Probably, in all the years since Yamoshi became king, everyone trained hard to get stronger, including Zukran, who must have trained a lot to surpass Yamoshi and take the throne. But apparently he wasn't able to evolve to the point of becoming a Super Saiyan while Aspa and Brokkon did. That must be really frustrating for him. But now, with this little cheat Zukran pulled off by fusing with Dema, it's not like he has to worry about that anymore. Zukran smiles. He congratulates the others for being able to resist his mind control, but tells them to look around. When Yamoshi, Brokkon and Aspa do that, they see that they're already completely surrounded by the other soldiers, all of them under Zukran's control, and already ready to feast on the livers of those three. Yamoshi realizes this with a lot of irritation, saying that damn Zukran managed to control the minds of all the others. And that's not the only problem. It looks like the power of those who've been controlled by him has increased. Since the magic Zukran is using is the same as Babidi's, then each of those soldiers must have had their power levels increase considerably. Zukran then orders his subjects to attack the other three, and the crowd obeys, charging at them with blood in their eyes. Yamoshi gives the order for Aspa and Brokkon to take care of the others, saying that he'll deal with Zukran himself. Aspa and Brokkon get ready to obey the king. unleashing their fiery auras with intensity. Brokkon, in full-on tank mode, plows through a bunch of soldiers like a bowling ball knocking down pins. Meanwhile, Aspa rushes at a bigger warrior and lands a flying kick right on him. Yamoshi goes for Zukran, charging at the Demon Saiyan and already going all in with his attacks. But Zukran dodges Yamoshi's strike with ease and even mocks him, saying that Yamoshi is way too slow. That pisses Yamoshi off and makes the king release even more of his power, now definitely going all out against Zukran. But to his frustration, Zukran keeps dodging all his attacks with ridiculous ease. There comes a moment when Zukran doesn't even bother dodging anymore and just decides to catch one of Yamoshi's punches, and to Yamoshi's shock, his punch gets caught with ridiculous ease too, with just one hand. And of course, Zukran doesn't miss the chance to mock Yamoshi again, this time saying that besides being slow, he's also weak. But now Zukran decides to stop playing defense and go on the offensive, landing a massive uppercut on Yamoshi so strong that it knocks out two of the king's teeth and sends him flying into the sky. After launching Yamoshi into the air, Zukran points his hand at him and starts using his magic. He uses that same energy whip he tried to use against Yamoshi back in the battle between the four kingdoms. Wrapping Yamoshi's ankle with the whip, Zukran yanks him back down, slamming him hard into the ground. Now, with the king lying before him, Zukran raises his other hand, now using his magical power to summon a demonic energy claw, which even closely resembles the energy claw used by Cumber from Dragon Ball Heroes. Zukran hurls his energy claw at Yamoshi, brutally impaling him into the ground, making Yamoshi hallucinate from the pain. When Brokkon sees this, he's absolutely shocked and definitely very worried about his king. At that moment, Brokkon is surrounded by several soldiers trying to hold him back, but Brokkon gets rid of them in an instant by releasing his energy aura, blasting everyone away like they were a bunch of dolls. After dealing with the other soldiers, Brokkon charges at Zukran without any fear, ready to defend his king. Yamoshi, who now doesn't even have the strength to get up, tries to tell Brokkon not to do it, but the king is already so weak that his voice barely comes out. Zukran's attack definitely pierced Yamoshi's lungs, and the result of that kind of lung puncture is massive internal bleeding that spreads through the airways, clogging the throat, for example, and making it hard to speak. Not to mention the lack of air also messes with speech. On top of that, an attack that pierced that deep probably also hit Yamoshi's spine, keeping him from being able to move. In other words, it looks like the king is really finding himself completely incapacitated now. Brokkon charges in with full force to land a punch at Zukran, who gets ready to take his attack. The clash between the two creates an explosion around them, showing the sheer power being used. But the one who lost this clash was the Slayer of 1,000, whose punch was stopped by just one hand of the Saiyan demon sorcerer. Then, using the same hand he used to block Brokkon's punch, Zukran blasts Brokkon's arm at point-blank range. Having just lost his last remaining arm, Brokkon can do nothing but scream in pain. And now Zukran finishes the job. He starts levitating to get right up in the giant's face, points his hand at him, and then fires off another energy wave at point-blank range. With that attack, Zukran destroys Brokkon's entire upper body, leaving only the legs of the 1,000 Slayer behind. A truly humiliating end for someone once considered a legendary warrior. Yamoshi, watching one of his most trusted commanders and subordinates die like that, is in agony trying to do something, but he can't. He's completely incapacitated. Right after Brokkon falls, someone else yells out for Zukran, who turns to look. It's Aspa, who has just defeated all the other soldiers, and now her final opponent is none other than Zukran himself. When Yamoshi sees that Aspa is about to attack Zukran too, he becomes even more desperate and tries to shout something at her, probably trying to tell Aspa not to fight and to flee instead. But nothing comes out of Yamoshi's mouth except blood and choking sounds. Aspa gathers all her power and launches herself at Zukran, rushing at the traitorous enemy like a flaming golden rocket. But Zukran is truly on another level now. With a simple flick of his finger, he sends out a small but powerful burst of air pressure. The problem is, Zukran is so strong that even that tiny burst of air from his finger is stronger than a bullet. It hits Aspa and blows out her stomach and back, knocking the bloody beauty to the ground. Yamoshi becomes even more desperate, and as Zukran walks past the fallen Aspa, the king chokes on his tears, trying to say something, but unable to. After passing Aspa, Zukran walks toward Yamoshi. He mocks him, saying that King Vegeta is having a very sad end to his reign. Zukran recalls how Yamoshi once believed this dynasty would last for millennia, but in the end it only lasted a few years and had only one king. At that moment, Yamoshi's heart is filled with hatred as intense as his sorrow, and the result is an expression of pure rage on his face, though tears stream from his eyes. Zukran admits that seeing Yamoshi like this feels great. It's a delight for him to see the proud legendary warrior, the Super Saiyan, choking on his own blood like a worm. Zukran decides he won't grant Yamoshi the mercy of a quick death. Instead, he'll let Yamoshi reflect on his defeat in agony until the end. The Saiyan demon sorcerer walks away, turning his back on Yamoshi and leaving the king to writhe in his final moments. As Yamoshi watches Zukran walk away, his vision starts to fade. Just as the traitor Zukran wanted, King Vegeta I, Yamoshi, died in agony, bleeding and suffering on the battlefield, crying over his fallen comrades and his shameful defeat. After his death, Yamoshi goes to the other world, and because of his great power, which undoubtedly far surpasses the average of mortals in Universe 7, he is sent to the planet of the Grand Kai. And to Yamoshi's joy, his great companions, Brocco and Aspa, were also sent there, which makes sense, since they are also great warriors. There on the Grand Kai's planet, the three companions reunite, and they are very happy about it. Yamoshi, Brocco, and Aspa discover that there are many powerful warriors among the dead, and they end up spending their time immersed in countless training sessions and battles. Despite everything that happened to them in life, and the fact that they died in such a brutal way, the three of them end up finding peace in the other world, living what would be the closest thing to a version of paradise for Saiyan warriors. And so, their hearts were at peace for over 1,000 years. But that was about to change when a figure arrived in the other world who caught Yamoshi's attention. This figure was an old Namekian, whom Yamoshi eventually approached. A few weeks after this old Namekian arrived, Yamoshi ended up becoming friends with him. This old Namekian's name was Neza. Through Neza, Yamoshi ended up learning what had happened to the Saiyans during the time he had been dead. Yamoshi is deeply shocked when he hears from Neza that the people of Sadala are attacking other planets across the universe and enslaving other peoples. He questions Neza about this indignantly. Neza confirms it and says that his planet, called Napal, was attacked by the Saiyans. He says that even with the Namekians joining forces with the other races that lived on Napal, they were no match and ended up being defeated. Neza recounts that most of Napal's inhabitants were killed, but some were taken to Sadala, where they began living as slaves. Yamoshi becomes furious when he finds this out and asks who the king of Sadala is now. Neza says that the name of the planet's king is Zukran, who is called the Sorcerer King. When Yamoshi finds out that Zukran is still the king of Sadala, he is extremely shocked and says that Zukran should have been dead for centuries, since he himself has been dead for a long time and Zukran shouldn't have lived that long. Neza understands Yamoshi's surprise. He also ended up discovering from living among the people of Sadala that Saiyans are not very long-lived, which means there's no way someone from that race could last for centuries. But he eventually found out that Zukran isn't a regular Saiyan, he's a demon Saiyan. Only now does Yamoshi seem to put the pieces together. Zukran had indeed fused with someone else, whom he later discovered to be a demon. At the time, Yamoshi didn't really understand who Dema was, since he probably didn't know much about other beings and people that existed outside of Sadala. However, after arriving in the other world, he definitely met people from many other races and learned a lot more about the universe during that time. He surely knows now who the Majins are, at least more or less. Neza tells Yamoshi that the vast majority of Majins have a much longer lifespan, which can stretch over centuries or millennia. If the demon Zukran fused with still had a long life ahead at the time, that means Zukran's life expectancy could have greatly increased after the fusion. So, for example, if we assume the fusion added up the lifespans of Zukran and Dema, and let's say Dema had 10,000 years of life left and Zukran had 100 years, that would mean the new Zukran, the result of the fusion, would have 10,100 years of life. And even if their life expectancy wasn't added but instead averaged out, Zukran would still end up with over 5,000 years of life. And here I'm assuming Dema had 10,000 years of life, which is relatively low, since there are Majin races that can live tens or even hundreds of thousands of years. Well, it's only now that Yamoshi realizes this issue of Zukran's extremely prolonged lifespan, and he becomes very angry about it, since he thought Zukran had already died and had been suffering in hell for a long time. Neza continues telling his story. He recounts that while he was living in Sadala, he saw most of his fellow Nepal survivors die, either from the extreme labor or from the limitless cruelty of the Sadala people. The Saiyans' wickedness was so great that most of Nepal's inhabitants couldn't bear it and ended up dying shortly thereafter. Yamoshi explains to Neza that all this excessive evil from the Saiyans is because of Zukran's magic. He doesn't deny the aggressive warrior nature of the Saiyans, but what Neza is describing goes way beyond the natural combative behavior of the race. Neza agrees with Yamoshi that the behavior of those people went beyond that of a merely aggressive people. They were so cruel that it completely surpassed anything natural. They had an inexplicable desire to do evil, something truly supernatural. Neza also says that although most of the Saiyans he met were like that, not all of them were. He heard that there are rebel factions that have been fighting against Zukran's tyranny for many years. The problem is that these rebels are few and they don't have enough power to bring down Zukran's reign. Either way, Yamoshi is happy with this information, because at least now he knows there are still good people in Sadala. Neza continues lamenting. He says that 4 of his children were also taken to Sadala, and he ended up losing 3 of them to the limitless cruelty of the Saiyans. In fact, he died trying to stop the death of his 3rd lost son, who, despite all his efforts to save him, was killed right in front of him. Now, all that remains of the Namekian people of Nepal and of Neza's family is his last surviving son, named Nezro. Neza is hoping his last son survives and manages to live a better life. Neza starts lamenting, saying that he wishes the power of his Dragon Ball could reach his son. Yamoshi doesn't understand when Neza says power of the Dragon Ball and asks what that is. Neza remembers that he's talking to someone who probably doesn't know what Dragon Balls are, and so he begins to explain them to Yamoshi. Neza then tells Yamoshi what Dragon Balls are and what they do. Yamoshi is stunned when he learns about the spheres and asks in amazement if the dragons summoned by them can really do anything. Neza replies that it's not exactly like that, and that the dragon's powers do have some limitations, since their powers are somehow connected to the powers of their creators. Neza says that Ropponga, which is the name of the dragon summoned by the Dragon Ball he created, has many limitations because his power isn't very high. One of Ropponga's limitations, for example, is that his magic's range is only a few hundred kilometers, which means that if Neza makes a wish to his dragon there in the other world, the wish won't affect his son back in Sadala, and that's a huge limitation, since we've seen wish-granting dragons use magic that can affect even other planets or the other world. Meanwhile, Neza's dragon has a range of only a few hundred kilometers, which is about the size of a small city. But Yamoshi ends up focusing on the other part of Neza's statement, where he says, make the wish here. Yamoshi then asks if Neza has his sphere with him. Neza replies that yes, and shows his sphere to Yamoshi. He was only able to create one sphere, and it's quite small. Neza explains that during the attack on Nepal, when he saw that the planet's population would be defeated and taken as prisoners, he swallowed the sphere to take it with him. Yamoshi takes a look at the sphere and says it's beautiful. Then he asks why Neza didn't use it to escape from Nepal with his children and his people. Neza explains that it's because once Dragon Balls are used, they can't be used again for a while. They need a recovery period. The time varies, and in his sphere's case, recovery takes 8 months. A little before the attack on Nepal happened, Neza had lent his sphere to people in a village that was suffering from a serious disease. Since the people in that village were good folks, he lent them the sphere so they could be healed by the dragon's magic. The problem is that the attack happened shortly after, and they weren't able to use the dragon's power to help. Neza swallowed the sphere so he could safely take it from Nepal, and he was waiting for the sphere to recover so he could use it in Sadala. The problem is that he ended up dying before that. Neza says that usually, when the creator of the Dragon Balls dies, the spheres can no longer be used, but in his case, the sphere still works even after his death.
probably because it was inside him and came along with him to this world. Neza admits he didn't expect that, but it was a lucky coincidence. Neza says that he's been able to use his sphere since yesterday. Yamoshi asks why he hasn't used it then. Neza replies that he simply doesn't know how to use its powers. Neza says that since he's in this world, the dragon's magic won't reach Sadala. He could wish to be resurrected, but even if he came back to life and went to Sadala, he wouldn't be able to do much because he is very weak. And since the dragon's power is limited, even if he wished to become stronger, he wouldn't become powerful enough to do anything against Zukran and his army. After saying all this, Neza swallows nervously, and that's when he finally reveals the reason he approached Yamoshi and is telling him all this. The truth is, he wants Yamoshi's help. Yamoshi is, of course, surprised by this. Neza reveals that he only asked to be sent to this planet specifically to find strong people who could help him. In the weeks he's been in this world, he's observed Yamoshi fight, and he knows that Yamoshi and his friends are very strong. On top of that, he noticed that they're nothing like those evil Saiyans serving Zukran. Neza then gets down on his knees and begs Yamoshi to agree to be brought back to life along with his friends and go to Sadala to rescue his son. As soon as he hears that, Yamoshi smiles right away. He says Neza doesn't even have to ask. Yamoshi quickly agrees and promises Neza that he'll return to Sadala with his companions, give Zukran what he deserves, and save all the good Saiyans and the people who are being enslaved on the planet. When Neza hears this, he lights up with joy and thanks Yamoshi with a huge hopeful smile on his face. After Neza cheerfully thanks him for agreeing to come back to life and return to Sadala, Yamoshi says there's no reason for Neza to thank him, since it's also in his interest to eliminate that bastard Zukran. Yamoshi asks Neza what the plan is. Neza explains that one important thing about the Dragon Balls is that the number of wishes you can make varies, and in the case of the sphere he created, you can make 4 wishes. The problem is that the magical power of the sphere he created is very limited, so the dragon summoned by that sphere can't grant wishes that require too much power. Neza says that the first 3 wishes he intends to make are to resurrect Yamoshi and his 2 companions, Brokon and Aspa, and the last wish he'll make is for the sphere to no longer be connected to his life, but to Yamoshi's life instead. In other words, it won't matter whether Neza is alive or dead, because the sphere will be linked to Yamoshi's life, so as long as Yamoshi lives, the sphere will work. Neza says it would also be good if the dragon's power were tied to Yamoshi's power instead of his, since Yamoshi is much stronger than Neza, and the dragon's magical power would be much less limited, but that's not going to be possible to wish for, since the dragon wouldn't be capable of granting itself all that power. Yamoshi asks if Neza is really sure he doesn't want to go to Sadala too, since that way he could reunite with his son and his fellow countrymen. Neza says that he's sure, and adds that someone as weak as him would just be a burden. And also, it's better for the sphere to be connected to Yamoshi's life instead of his, since it's definitely much harder to kill Yamoshi than to kill him. Yamoshi respects Neza's decision and tells him not to worry, assuring him that they will save his son and defeat Zukran. Neza's Dragon Ball is used, and the Wish Dragon is summoned. Yamoshi, Brokon and Aspa are quite impressed when they see the dragon, since it's the first time they're seeing one. As planned, Neza summoned his dragon, named Roppunga, and made the 4 wishes. The first 3 were to resurrect Yamoshi, Brokon and Aspa, and the 4th wish was to make the Dragon Ball tied to Yamoshi's life instead of Neza's. After that, Neza taught Yamoshi how to use the sphere and summon the dragon. And as soon as they were brought back to life, Yamoshi and his companions went to King Yema, and they asked Yema to send them back to planet Sadala. A few days later, on planet Sadala, a group of Saiyan soldiers serving Zukran are surrounding another group of people, and among those being surrounded, we can see that most of them are chained up and wearing ragged clothes, which suggests that these people are slaves. Among these slaves, we see a seemingly young Namekian. This Namekian is probably Neza's son, whose name is Nezro. But among these people, not everyone is chained up. In fact, we see a few individuals, apparently Saiyans, who are free and standing on the side of the captives. These free Saiyans don't seem to be Zukran's soldiers, which suggests that they are rebel warriors siding with the slaves. Among these rebel Saiyans, 2 women stand out. One of them is a warrior from the planet's main rebel force. Her name is Kanach. And the other woman is the vice leader of the planet's main rebel force. Her name is Selen. Kanach and Selen are seriously pissed off. Kanach points out that Zukran's soldiers use the slaves as bait to lure them into a trap, and Selen, furious, calls them cowards. A guy who seems to be the leader of this unit of Zukran's army mocks the rebels. He says he never thought the vice leader of the planet's main rebel group would come to save mere slaves. What incredible luck for him. He says that if he captures Selen, he'll definitely get the promotion he's been dreaming of. So it seems what happened here is the following. Apparently, the rebel groups on Sadala, or at least this main group that Selen and Kanak are part of, have been freeing slaves across the planet. So Zukran's imperial army decided to set a trap for the rebels using a group of slaves as bait. But the vice leader of that group herself came on the mission to free the slaves and walked right into the ambush. The very fact that the vice leader of this rebel group was sent to rescue a group of slaves already shows just how much this group truly cares about the slaves. Anyway, this Saiyan who leads Zukran's army unit orders his soldiers to kill everyone except for the vice leader, Selen. The imperial soldiers then open fire on the rebels and the slaves, either with their own energy blasts or with weapons. Since the rebels are surrounded, they're kind of at a loss for what to do, since shots are coming from every direction. Kanak asks Selen what they're going to do, and not even Selen knows. In other words, everyone's screwed. But suddenly, some blurry figures begin to appear around the rebels and the slaves, and these figures start deflecting the Imperial soldiers' attacks, knocking them away. No one understands what's happening. The leader of the Imperial soldiers asks what's going on. Kanak also asks Selen what it is, and Selen doesn't know. The truth is, the blasts are being deflected so fast that no one can figure out what's going on. But then, everyone starts to get it when three powerful figures appear next to the rebels and the slaves, and these figures are Yamoshi, Aspa and Brokon. When the leader of the Imperial soldiers sees the three of them, he asks who they are. He obviously assumes they're rebel soldiers who came as reinforcements. But clearly that's not the case, since the vice leader of the rebellion herself, Selen, asks who they are. The three warriors who just arrived begin to introduce themselves. The woman in the group says her name is Aspa, and that she was once known around Sadala as the Bloody Beauty. The giant of the group, not humble at all, says he's the great Brokon, the slayer of 1,000. And the leader, with that mischievous and proud little grin on his face, says that his birth name is Yamoshi, but they can call him King Vegeta. Obviously, Kanak and Selen are completely shocked when they hear that. And that's how chapter 2 of Dragon Ball Hakai Special, the story of Yamoshi, ends. And with the end of this special side story chapter, we're already jumping into production on the next chapter of the main Dragon Ball Hakai story, returning to the saga of God of Destruction Goku and the other Z warriors in their quest to grow stronger in order to face the great war that's coming. In fact, the next chapter of the main Dragon Ball Hakai story is already in production, and very soon we'll be bringing you the videos with its parts right here. But it's important to say, for the Dragon Ball Hakai story to keep going here on the channel, whether it's side stories or the main story, we need a good return in views, because producing a manga takes a lot of work and isn't cheap. So, help us out by leaving your like and your comment on the video to boost its engagement here on the platform. Share this video with any Dragon Ball fan you know so more people can discover our work, and subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed so you don't miss our videos, especially the Dragon Ball Hakai ones. And if you're able to help us even more, consider joining our Patreon. That way, starting with just a small amount, you can already help a lot with the continuation of Dragon Ball Hakai and receive some exclusive channel perks like getting early access to the pages before they're published in the videos. I'm not kidding, folks, I can say with absolute certainty that Dragon Ball Hakai only still exists because of the people who support the channel like that, and I'm truly grateful to every one of them. But things are still tough, so we need more of those heroes for the story to keep going. Anyway, huge thanks to everyone who left a like on the video, shared it, commented, subscribed, and supported us financially. It's thanks to you that this project is still standing strong. Big hugs to all of you, and see you in the next video.